Okay, let's jump forward a little bit. So I am Emma Migneault. I'm with Geo-Instruments out of Southern Rhode Island. And I wanted to take the time today to talk about supportive excavation monitoring and what options we have to do that. This is a little weird being on stage like this. I haven't done it since probably third grade when I was singing 50 Nifty United States, but I won't sing today until the end maybe. But when we talk to people about supportive excavation monitoring, when it first comes up, people are thinking, what am I going to do? Am I going to phone a friend? And hopefully that's yes, and it's me. But you might also be looking at systems that you've used in the past that have been reliable in producing the data you needed. Or you might be looking for something new. If it's a new condition, different type of project, or different risk associated, you might need some new options to fit the project needs. So when we get started on any of these projects, we do like to understand the details about the project first. Get into a conversation that you can really kind of break down into these 4 W's. You don't need the 5th, but looking at what, why, when, and where, and then we know how we're going to be able to put together an automated monitoring solution. So starting out with what are we monitoring? So in this instance, we're talking about supportive excavation. So we might be talking about sheeting. We might be talking about soil nails. And not to forget adjacent infrastructure. A lot of this work is done in urban environments where we have to be concerned with adjacent buildings, adjacent utilities, maybe bridges, and also rail. Where I am in the Boston area for a lot of our projects, rail is a big component of the monitoring that we end up doing associated with supportive excavation monitoring. So the reasons that we monitor, sometimes we get the call and it's like, well, I have to, so can you come do this? But otherwise, sometimes it's about mitigating risk. Sometimes it's about design validation and construction control. But whatever the reason, we got to understand the project to come up with a good solution that can provide all the data values that are needed to understand what's happening on site and make objective decisions. So when are we monitoring? Not really just to block off on the calendar what we have to do and when we have to do it, but really to understand primarily the frequency of monitoring over a baseline period and then through the project. Frequency of monitoring can really dictate what kind of systems are able to perform in that situation and give the data that we need. So are we looking at once a week? Are we looking at a couple times a day? Or are we looking at every few minutes? It definitely makes it's a big factor in when we pick the systems that can make that data happen at that frequency. It's also good to think about the duration of monitoring. If we're going through various conditions and we need to just be aware of them, whether that's increasing the maintenance schedule over winter months, especially in New England, that's pretty important. Or if it's just, understanding how it might factor into solar power for the systems. Understanding the duration of the project can be pretty important to what systems we design and how those systems function on site. So where are we monitoring? So we're monitoring the supportive excavation, but are we monitoring just at the top, or do we have to come back and install more along with the progression of work? What is the access leg for those locations, and how does that determine, in terms of initial installation or system maintenance through the project life? Definitely important things to consider. We also want to think about the number of monitoring points. What spacing do we need them at, both for the supportive excavation or for adjacent infrastructure, and what's going to be able to give us the best picture of what's happening on site. So this kind of brings us to how. Having that conversation, understanding the parameters that you're looking at gives us the how, what systems we can pull from the toolbox to give the best monitoring solution possible and get that data in hands to make those decisions and to understand what's going on site. So there's a bunch of different systems that you can use. Sorry, it's a little cut off here, but I'm going to be able to go through a couple of them, not too many more. You're always welcome to stop by our booth or give us a call to find out more, but there are a lot of options. So it's important to we'll go through a couple of them, do some pro cons, see how they fit into what we talked about earlier in terms of how they fit into that conversation of understanding the project needs. And then the last thing I did want to talk about too is the data visualization, the data platform. So you have all this data on site, but you need that last component of the toolbox, the visualization, the platform, to be able to take that data and understand it, to bring it to all the stakeholders to make the decisions you need to make about your project. So when I was thinking about these systems and trying to think about, going through them in a shorter time frame, I thought pro-con list is the way that I like to think about things quickly. But it felt a little unfair to give these systems a con list. It's not necessarily a con for the system, it's just less of a pro. It might be perfectly applicable to some projects, maybe just not the one you're looking at in that moment. So my pro and less pro for this one, the automated motorized total station. This is a great system, and we put it on a lot of projects. Actually, there's one at our booth right now. It's reading cycles for prisms that aren't there, so it's futile efforts for a couple days. But one of the things that makes this system really versatile is that we have a lot of prism options or monitoring point options for the system. So it can monitor more than just one structure. It can be monitoring the supportive excavation. It can be monitoring adjacent structures. It can be monitoring rail or hardscape or utilities. So it gives us a lot of options in where we can use this system and what we can monitor with it. The data output for this system is definitely a bonus. We're getting an XYZ reading from each one of those prism targets that's installed on site. So you can really understand the movement at that discrete point, but also as a whole, if we're talking about the side of a building. You can look at all the points there and see what the trend is between all of them. The less pro section on AMTS is that it does require line of sight. It's an optical measuring system. So that total station on site has to be able to see all of those prism targets to be able to give you a reading. So in some projects, that might mean that you just need more than one station. So you can have one on either side of site. You can kind of see it in this image I have here. We have one system that has the lines in blue from where it's mounted to all the monitoring points, and the other one in red. So it was just a matter of finding two places that we could get line of sight to all the points that really mattered. And some projects you might need more than two. So automated inclinometers or shape arrays. These are also something that we end up seeing on site a lot. This was a project down in Texas. And a pro to this is it's a great instrument that once you're putting it into casing is easy to deploy and quick to automate. So you can be putting it in the morning and getting data by the afternoon. And it's giving you that lateral deformation that you need to understand the performance of the SOE. However, you do have to put it in the ground. So, or in this application, you're putting it in the ground. So you do have to get it either, behind that SOE system or within the system itself. So that part of the installation is definitely a little bit more time consuming and involves more resources. The instrument itself is also higher cost than some of the alternatives, also higher cost than the manual alternative, but for rapid data collection can be a really good option. You can see a visualization of the data actually from 3 of the units on that project. So HLCs, hydrostatic level cells, these are actually a little near and dear to my heart. This was the first system that I got to install in the field when I signed up with Geo-Instruments on some cold and rainy days. But it was a great system to put into place. It was actually on this building that we see here. And this system is great for providing high frequency data of settlement and heave that can read in the range of minutes. So it can be really applicable for techniques such as in this application, it was jet grouting, where you really need that rapid data collection to understand the performance of the activity that you're doing and the building adjacent. The thing that makes this, both a pro and a less pro here is the system itself, the installation. It's customizable in where you can put the sensor cells, but you are limited in the fact that you have these sensor cells going on this structure and they need to be connected not only by the signal cable for us to get the readings from the sensors, but also by a line of liquid and a line of air. And they have to be within, a tight threshold of one another in terms of the level they're installed on. So that can be a little tricky. It's an installation that involves multiple days and multiple people, but for the right application, it has a great data deliverable and can be really valuable. This one actually, to point out another system here, right above that first sensor cell that you see, is actually a prism target. So this was a combination of two systems reading, one at a high frequency to give us settlement and heave data, and then the AMTS reading at a slightly lower frequency. I think that was about 3 to 4 hours, and that's giving us an XYZ at that same point. So you have a redundant measurement, and you can really understand both on that quick time scale and then every few hours what's happening at that point. So tilt meters, wireless tilt meters, wired tilt meters as well, although we haven't used a wired tilt meter in a while. These are good systems for a rapid deployment. They have quick installation, and they can have quick reading frequency as well. I have up there that 15 minutes is kind of a quick reading frequency. They can go faster than that, but there is a slight trade-off in between the reading frequency and the battery life. These are battery-powered instruments, and the faster you go, the faster you deplete the battery within them. So you can go faster if you want, but you just have to keep in mind what that might mean for the power consumption. These systems do run on a flat mesh network, which, if you're not familiar with it, it is a great system of allowing multiple nodes, tilt meters included, as well as nodes that can read other systems, to communicate with a gateway on site and transmit that data. So you can operate multiple instrument systems with one flat mesh network. But we do have to keep in mind that the flat mesh network, whether it be tilt meters or tilt meters plus, has to have an ability to transmit that data out, whether it be directly from the node to the gateway or from node to gateway, can hop around. So making sure that you have multiple avenues for the data to get to the gateway and out is important. If you have it kind of all filtering through one node based on going around structures or going around site constraints, an excavator knocks that node off and you're without data for a couple days until you get that replacement up. Environmental systems, I've kind of looped them together in vibration, dust, and noise. And these are something that are really just now a requirement on most projects that we see. And if not a requirement, a good idea to have. The plus for most of these systems is that there's a lot of configuration options to make sure that they suit the needs of the project. So if you're talking about a vibration monitor, your sensor could be on the structure, on the exterior. In the interior, it could be a borehole geophone. And then you make the configuration of the communications and the power peripheral to match. So I have some of the rugged ones there on the side that were installed on a project site where there was public access, so they needed to be really pretty heavy to make sure they didn't leave site, but also pretty resilient. I think one of those was actually hit by a truck 3 times. After the 3rd time, we moved it. And then some of the less pro section about this is that something like a dust monitor is a power-hungry instrument. So, needing these on site, you do have to accommodate for the power considerations of something like that. So that you can see there is a huge solar panel and a rugged enclosure to have a very large battery backup for that system to make sure that you can get that system running and working the way you need over the period of time you have it out there. And then at the end, you're pulling all of that and putting it into your data platform. Maybe one of the most important parts, you can have all the instruments on site, but you need to have them in your hand. You need to have them on your phone at this conference so you can be checking this instead of listening to this boring talk that I'm giving you, or you can be checking it from your office or while you're on site, getting that good picture of what's happening to the structure you're looking at or the supportive excavation wall that you're looking at in front of you. So putting it all together, there's a lot of solution options out there, and it's understanding what it is you need, what questions you're answering, and then finding the solution that fits best. And from there, you have a solution that's really going to be beneficial to all the stakeholders on the project and make everyone happy. I'd say that it's like a light at the end of the tunnel when you start to when you finish designing and implementing your program. But since this was about SOE, I'll say it's the rainbow adjacent to site instead. Thank you. Good.
Thanks very much. I think we have about 1 minute for questions, so if there's any questions anybody wants to do.
Yes. Thank you.
By now, you must have amassed massive amounts of movement data for support excavations. You got a lot of pictures of that. Have you ever published data like typical movements in support excavations?
Yeah.
I forgot to mention this, but if the speakers could also repeat the question as best they can, because we are videotaping this and it's hard to hear the audience.
Got it. Okay, so the question being, do we have record and kind of expected movement from the data that we've collected on supportive excavation, the monitoring that you'd see with that. And, I think we've definitely seen our fair share of projects and, in some applications, our fair share of movement, right? Whether it be within the parameters they're expecting or not. But with the variety of systems and locations and projects, we haven't really applied it as a standard. Kind of each one gets taken a little separately. We're also, making sure to provide that data on our end, but we're leaving the analysis of that data in your hands. So. Great, thank you.